Good morning. I'd like to call to order the September 9th meeting of the Infrastructure Services Committee and acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the territory of the Seashell and Squamish First Nations. We have an agenda before us. There is a report that came late, but other than that, I don't believe we have any agenda changes. So could I see a motion to adopt the agenda? Moved, seconded. Any discussion? All right, calling the question. Adopting the agenda, all in favor? We have an agenda. Excellent. Next, if we could have a motion to accept all the reports and communications. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Excellent. Thank you very much. And then we go straight to the highlight of my bi-weekly schedule, which is our water supply update.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to share my screen for the purpose of this update. Yes, there we are. Hope everybody can see it. Okay. So I'm happy to present another water supply update to you. Last week at Planning Community Development, I provided a more succinct one, and this one will be a little bit more elaborate. So what are the current conditions? We currently have the EOC for drought response 2021 activated for 18 days. About 70% of the water we're currently still getting from our Edwards Lake and siphon system at Chapman Lake, 20% from Grey Creek, Chester Well, and Town of Gibsons is providing the remainder of the water. Since last week, we received about 9 millimeters of rain at Seashell Airport. And there is additional rain in the upper watershed, but unfortunately our rain gauge at Chapman Lake was malfunctioning and is currently repaired, but it wasn't functioning for last week, so we don't know exactly how much rain actually fall at Chapman Lake itself, but it was more than 9 millimeters, that's for sure. So this is how Chapman Lake looked like yesterday morning when staff were up there, and you really can see that the drop in the water level had a significant impact, especially in the far side of the lake. At the far end, in the top left corner, that's where the outlet is located, and you're looking more or less towards Seashell. That's where Chapman Creek and the outflow is. So this is in the towards the Mount Steele, towards the back, where really a significant amount of shore or bottom is currently exposed. And we're currently almost 3.5 meters below the top of the weir. And if the siphon would be fully used, all the allowable volume will be extracted through the siphon, we would get to -8. So you can anticipate what the lake would look like at that point in time. This is the water use last several days. It's really just above 10 million cubes. And if you compare that with where we were a month ago, when we called stage 4, it was around 15, 16. So this is a really good effort, and I think the fact that it is this low is really helping us in terms of securing a water supply moving forward. So this is the daily residential household for the areas where we have meters installed, and you can really see between July and August the sharp decline in the areas where the areas within the Chapman water system, due to the stage 4 being declared in those areas. North, South, and Egmont, Knowles Cove, August, it was lower as well. I think in part because the temperatures were a little bit lower, but you can clearly see the steeper decline in the other areas due to stage 4 being activated there. This is a new graph, which is the average daily demand for commercial and institutional use. You can also see the steep decline in August, and we would have not been able to really analyze these data precisely yet, but most likely that's the result of stage 4 as well, and particular farmers that were using water and that are not using water anymore because of stage 4. There was several requests from the community members as well as from directors on what are the top users. So based on our August data, that the meter reads we did late August, I pulled the top 30 users in our system and indicated if they're residential, institutional, or commercial. The actual usage per day, if they have a leak in August, and if shut-off notifications were sent based on the July data. So shut-off notifications were sent to properties which had a large leak late July. So you can see that, for example, the biggest one, the top user in August, was a new leak. So staff are working on that one to get that one resolved. And there was one where the leak was resolved late August, just prior or about the same time that the meter read was done. So it shows as a leak, but most likely there is no leak anymore. And otherwise, you can see that it is an interesting combination between commercial, residential, and the occasional institutional user that are making up the top 30 of the users. I have to say that some of the residential users are not single dwelling properties. Some of these are, for example, where we have one connection, but it could be that there are 2 or 3 dwellings, for example, on that one connection. So that could be an explanation of the high use. However, as you can see, most of these properties have leaks. So the consumption would go down significantly if those leaks would be fixed. What's the weather forecast for the upcoming weeks? Some rain forecast for the upcoming week, more afterwards. So it's looking like more rain is coming our way. Let's hope that indeed falls. So what is the supply forecast? I think we can now easily say that the water supply is guaranteed until at least October 15th at our current demand of below 10,500 cubic meters a day. And which is good news. Last week, I said it was October 1st, and I think with the rain we had and the low consumption and all the effect of all the other measures that have been taken, I think we can now say that at least October 15th, and of course any rain, and there is some rain in the forecast, can extend it even further. So things are looking really good from that perspective. However, it means that we're still in stage 4, and we will continue to be that way because we're also still using siphons to provide water from Chapman Lake. It's only not that the chance that we're running out of water entirely. I think that one is dissipating at the moment. So what is the update on emergency measures? We're continuing to work on our siphon system at Edwards Lake, but we just delayed the targeting date for commissioning to mid-October. However, certain commitments in terms of materials have already been made. In terms of the large leak escalation, there are shut-off notices. As indicated before, we issued 15 in late August. staff are in contact with all of the owners. You can imagine that these owners some of them were surprised, some of them were afraid of what was going to happen. So we're working with all of them to explain what's happening, how they can detect the leak, and we're urging them to fix their leak. Tomorrow's the deadline for the fix to be leaked, the fixes to be completed, and today staff are out there to confirm the fixes of the leaks that are fixed. At this point in time, I cannot say if any of the water supply to any of these properties is actually going to be shut off. We are still working with some property owners today to resolve the issues. And in general, I think this is it's a lot of work for a lot of additional work for staff, but the importance, I think, is there, and it definitely resulted in action by the homeowners or the property owners, because some of these are residential and some are commercial. We also sent the letters to above average users, and as indicated before, that includes residents with more than one household on the property. It's hard for us to know that upfront. To have our databases are not allowing us to combine all of the information. So some of the high use might be very reasonable, given that there are more people living on one property, and that's a conversation we're having with the people that are calling us. But also there is a significant response through the phones and emails of people that have received this letter, and it definitely encouraged some action in terms of water conservation and subscriptions to a monthly water supply update email. But I'll more to that later. We're still receiving water from the town of Gibsons, and if that's still required, we'll reconsider early next week and inform the town about that. As indicated earlier, the installation of ice in the arena is delayed and won't be available until shortly after Thanksgiving, and that will be confirmed next week, the timeline. And currently no other additional measures are considered. While earlier on there were, for example, measures considered or explored if a state of emergency would be required to be declared, and that's currently not anticipated. How are other systems doing? South Pender Harbor, the Madeira Park system. We went to stage 2 there on August 20, in part because we were concerned about lake levels, and we noticed that the community demand exceeded our allowable demand on our water license. Early August, the demand indeed exceeded our allowable use, and since that only happened once. So thank you for the community to your response to the declaration of stage 2, and currently we don't see any issues with the lake levels at McNeil. They are low, but no concern there given the time of the year we're in. Eastbourne, well production is continuing to decrease until the fall rain really hits there. They really need big showers as well to recharge the aquifer. So the zone filling is continuing there. However, because after September long weekend, usually the amount of people that are actually using the system is down after the September Labor Day long weekend. So we expect that the current supply is sufficient at stage 4 to meet the demand of the community there. So we issued recently some additional fines to people. In total, we're now at 8, and we issued several warnings in the Pender Harbor area, but no fines at this point in time. Our subscriptions to our monthly water use update were in the 250s a month ago. There were now over 100 more, and the tally is going up every day because, as I indicated before, a lot of high water users are now subscribing to this update program, which is very beneficial. We sent out about 450 leak notifications late last week. So those were all leaks identified based on our August reads, meter reads, this amount is consistent with what we did in June. In June, it was about 400, so now it's 450. So it just shows that ongoing efforts focus on resolving those leaks is paramount. And I have to say, compared to where we were 2 years ago, the additional staff members that were approved by the board in the last 2 years really are allowing us to focus on the leak resolution with the homeowners and allowing us to have the required conversation. So it's really helping us to address the leaks. We also sent those letters out to households that were using more than 1,400 liters a day. We sent out about 400, and as indicated, a lot of them are responding by phone or email. So in total, we had about 1,200 interactions only last week with residents, which is good. And as indicated before, we have now a webpage on our website, information for residents on how to identify leaks on their property and how to help them out to address them. And more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, GM Rosenboom. Just really interesting presentation as always. I see hands going up. And let me just readjust my screen here. So first up is Director Toth.
I appreciate the offer, Chair, but I believe that Director Ties was in front of me.
You're right. Director Ties, you're on.
Haha. Thank you for that. My question is, what is the criteria to send shut-off notifications? Because when I looked at the graph or the statistics on properties, the high-use properties, some had a leak and did not get a shut-off notification. Some did that were lower down. So what is the criteria?
Thank you for the question. As indicated, the shut-off notifications were sent to properties that had a leak in July, a big leak in July, and were notified prior. So if a new leak occurred in July, or then if it was a big leak, then first just initial leak notifications was sent to them and follow-up is completed. And so the short-off notifications for leaks, long-standing leaks that people were made aware of several times and no action was taken yet. And then we sent the new short-off notifications based on the data we had late July.
Thank you. Director Toth, it's your turn now.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions and then one comment or request. How do we determine residential versus commercial when we're looking at these statistics? You know, are we talking about property zoning? Are we talking about staff recognize, that somebody's hung a shingle out on the road and flagged it in the system? So that's the first question. And then the second question is, how was the 1,400 liter per day threshold determined? I think I know the answer to it. I'd like to hear it in the meeting. And then the third thing, the list that you showed us said 30 properties, but the list only had 20 properties on it. So If there's more, can we be circulated that list, please? Thank you.
Thank you. To start with the later one, I indeed slimmed it down to the top 20 because otherwise it would be unreadable on my screen. So I will send along the top 20, top 30 list separately. The 1,400 liters a day were determined because was that like in July, 1,400 a day. That was about the maximum. Was about the highest average use in the area. So everybody that was using more than 1,400 were really the top users in the area. And that's why the 1,400 were selected. And maybe you can recollect early this year, we had a graph on 38 or 9% of the people were using 38% of the water. All these residents are within the 9%. That's how these were identified. And commercial versus residential is really based on rate structure. All the larger commercial users on the coast and the institutional are on a volumetric rate structure. So they're being built based on the amount of water they're using. And so it's really based on the rate structure, so within the residential category, there are definitely small commercial businesses that are run from a residential property or whatever. They are still on a flat rate, so we categorize them as being residential at this point in time. And this is, of course, all something that can be revised if and when a rate structure review would take place. But currently it's really flat rate versus volumetric rate.
I'm just going to ask a follow-up question. So it's not dependent on zoning?
Nope. It's primarily dependent on how people are being built.
Interesting. Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. We're going to get through this. Thanks to staff and everyone pitching in. So thanks. The question I had was going back to kind of how much water's in the bank. So the siphon right now is the effective range for the remainder is between 3.5 meters, minus 3.5 meters, and -8. That's kind of the last little bit. And then are we still looking for these 25 millimeter days of rain to start to replenish the lake, or does 10 start to help at this point?
Thank you for the question. As indicated, we're using currently the siphon as well on Edwards Lake. I didn't provide the information on Edwards Lake, so we're currently using both. So that's why we're confident that we will have enough water at least for the next month. I'm confident there. However, I have to say we've never operated both systems as low as we might need to use them in upcoming weeks. So there is some uncertainty how they behave, but I think even given that, we're sure that we have enough. Any rain event that we're having is beneficial because even if it stabilizes the lake level while we're drawing from it, that's a benefit. But we still need that multiple day rain events to really fill Chapman Lake back up to where we can actually start using the valve again, and only then we can go back to, for example, a stage 3. So as long as we need the siphon system to take water out of Edwards or out of Chapman, we will continue to need to be in stage 4.
Thank you. I'm just going to point out, but you can quantify this, that once we start using the valve again, our costs decline in terms of helicopters and staff. Would that be correct?
Yes. There will be significant benefit from an operational perspective and a financial perspective there.
Thank you. I had a question, and that is, most of these leaks that are occurring, can I assume that they're in older parts of the system with older infrastructure?
Yes and no, because they're on the private side. It can be that somebody is working in their yard or did work in their yard early this year, hit its water line, and hit their water line. No leak sprung at that point in time, but due to the pressure over time, there's a leak right now. It's because it's on the private side. It's not really related to the construction date of the water mains. Is really on what happened on the individual development. And it can even be just ground settling, trees, roots, those kind of activities that can cause leaks to occur.
Thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to follow up on my earlier residential versus commercial question. So, recognizing, volumetric billing, we're going to call you commercial. Okay. How does somebody end up with volumetric billing? Let's say I'm new to the coast. I've bought 5 acres. I'm going to plant an orchard and start watering, with the intent to sell fruit or whatever, but I'm still zoned, residential, and maybe I don't have a shingle out. Is there a process by which we recognize their water usage and approach them and say, hey, really, you're a commercial user, we're going to move you to volumetric billing? Or, how does somebody end up on volumetric billing if they aren't already?
That's a good question that I don't fully have the answer for, and the CFO is not joining us, Tina Pro, at the moment. So, if you're okay, I will take the question and make sure that the answer gets to you. And I think what I know is that one of the criteria is usually commercial users have a bigger connection because they're using more water than a 1-inch connection that usually residential. So usually a commercial is bigger, and they have special meters that can actually handle the flows that's being provided by the bigger users. But that's the infrastructure side of the house. I will confirm with our CFO if there's also another side of the house as well, and how to determine what is commercial versus not.
Good. Thank you very much. Director Lee.
Busy looking for the buttons. Just a little clarification on the levels of the water. It was minus 3.5, and we could go down to minus 8. But is that minus 3.5 from the bottom of the dam? So are we actually minus 6.5 from a full dam down on the lake? Right.
No, it's from the top of the dam.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Right, but as we go down, the size of the lake diminishes, so yeah. Excellent. Director Seegers. You're on mute.
Yes, I got that. Thank you. I apologize for being late. We had a meeting with BC Housing that ran over into this one. So I didn't see the presentation. I'll go back and watch the water presentation. I always find them fascinating. One of the questions that I like to bring up is around reclaimed water. So right now in the District of Sechelt, we are putting together a reclaimed water strategy. And one of the potential uses of reclaimed water could be reducing the environmental flow needs in Chapman Creek. So I'd like to hear from staff what the impact of that would be on, what's required in Chapman or our water use.
Thank you for the question. I had several discussions in the past with Sechelt staff on the potential reuse of reclaimed water for augmentation of flows at Chapman. What it would require is that water to be pumped from water resource center up to our water intake at the creek, which is an elevation of 274 meters above sea level. and the water would be need to be pumped all the way along Dusty Road and then into the because that's where our intake is located. So, although it would most likely require all kind of permits, adjustments from DFO and Flynn Road, and there could be a benefit because it would offset some of the need to release water from the lakes, because any flow that we get from any additional flow would require us to release less from the lake. I think from a capital investment and operational side of the house, it would be really big investments would be required to get the water where it would need to be released, and well as the operational cost in terms of pumping to get the water from the elevation of the resource center to 274 meters would be significant. And the reason why it needs to be released at that point is that our EFN is measured just below our intake location. So that's where the 200 liters a second need to be maintained. So that's why the flow would need to be returned or put in the creek at that location.
Okay, follow up. Right now we are releasing over 2,000 cubic meters per day into the ocean. And as development increases, as population increases, that amount is going to increase. It also will require that with our water resource center, we're going to have to upgrade our outfall. A significant cost. So do we at that point look at putting the additional water into the ocean, or do we look at augmenting flows in Chapman Creek? And I think that's a conversation that we need to look at, because it's water that is actually very high quality that we're just putting out into the ocean. So I'd like to see that conversation continue, and we can incorporate that into our reclaimed water strategy. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One is, the last time we saw a list of the 20 highest water users was 2 years ago. And we got an unexpurgated version of that list in camera. And if it's possible to get that list in camera today, that would be appreciated, because we could compare it to the list from 2 years ago to see what has changed over the course of time. So the other thing that has been coming up a lot as citizens have been paying a lot of attention to the weather lately is that there is not a lot of data out there in terms that the only full service sort of weather station for the Sunshine Coast is Sechelt Airport, that you can access the data online. And I'm just wondering if there is anything that we could do in an advocacy sense to improve the weather information that we get here on the coast.
We would welcome, we have, because of the lack of other stations, we have our own station at our treatment facility and at Chapman Lake, and we're improving those. And any more stations would, of course, be welcomed, because it will give us a better sense of patterns, etc., etc. But
good. Perhaps we can have that conversation at a future time. Director Seegers.
I seem to recall that we had something come forward, I believe it's to a recent planning meeting, where they were looking at installing additional environmental measurement systems on the Sunshine Coast.
there is a project on the way by Environment Canada to install a new weather station in Half Moon Bay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I observed that there was a question in the gallery, and generally our process is to leave questions to the end of the meeting. Today we have two two important items on water. So I'm going to deviate from our usual process, and after the Church Road report, I'm going to allow public questions if they are pertinent and they are about water. So I see no further hands up in the room. So if we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Church Road Wellfield Development Project update.
Thank you, Chair. McMahon. I want to provide the board and the committee with an update on where we are with our Church Road well application. As indicated in the report, we're still awaiting a response from the Squamish Nation in terms of any feedback, comments, questions they have with respect to the application. We met with them late July, and I anticipate to receive, or they indicated that we could receive a response letter anytime. And the reason for this item to be a late item on this agenda was that I was hoping to get the letter from them earlier this week, so I could update the board on that, but I haven't received anything to date yet. The purpose of this report is also to request additional budget to be additional funds to be provided from the existing budget to our contractor to help us with any questions we might receive from the Squamish Nation, as well as to address any of the outstanding items from the ministry. There are still a couple of questions and information requests they had, and our contractor has already started working on those. But it would be nice if we can amend the contract so that actually they can get paid for the work they're already undertaking. So staff are here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Do I see any question? Director Seegers.
I don't have any questions. I'd be willing to move the recommendations as on the page here. I don't think it's page 1 of this, or I guess it is on this. I think we want to ensure that, as you know, we want to move this project forward as quick as possible. So any questions that come from the ministry, that come from the Squamish Nation, we want staff to be able to address those as quickly as possible so we don't hold things up. So I'd like to make sure that they have the resources to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion, we have a seconder. And we have a speakers list. Director Ties.
Yeah, thank you. I guess it's not a question directly related to Church Roadwell, but considering that we're now having issues because of being in the same aquifer, I am wondering how this might affect our applications for Langdale in the future, and then also for Frank West Hall, and whether we need to reconsider some of our options at this point and kind of broaden our search so that we don't get shoehorned into the same issue over and over again.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. The Langdale well is wellfield. The current well and the proposed wellfield is in a different aquifer than the aquifer that Church Road and the town of Gibson's aquifer is in. So that's one of the reasons why. And there is no other large users in that area other than some residential in the Langdale. So I don't foresee that a similar issue to occur at the Langdale aquifer. However, that's different for Marianne West. Marianne West Park, which is located in the same aquifer, and that's why for that, the board earlier this year confirmed that we first will do additional monitoring, additional assessment to actually see if that's even a realistic option, and if there will be no impacts to or the Church Road well field or any of the current wells and the licenses that are currently being applied for by the town of Gibsons. So in terms of reconsidering of the options, I think the Langdale well is the best option we have currently because it's there, as indicated, it's high use. The well is very productive and there are no larger uses in the area. So I don't see any larger issues there. And Marianne, that's really to be confirmed if that's really realistic option to develop further. And I think further work there is required in collaboration with the town of Gibson staff and ministry staff on that item. And that's why part of the future work with the ministry and Squamish and town of Gibsons is associated with the determining of the sustainability of the aquifer. And the proposal is really to do that as a collaborative, including work with the nation.
Thank you. I see Director Beamish.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In meetings we're having right now with the ministries, and whether they're ministers or staff, 2 occasions it popped out to me that we are not being seen as true partners in process. We have one. Now, I won't go into the details of them, but it's very clear that we need to be at the table for all conversations. In this report, and I see the last paragraph on page 1 of this report demonstrates again why we need to represent our interests at meetings held with all parties that are decision makers in a process. When it becomes evidence that you attend a meeting and discuss that Flynn Road had not yet forwarded relevant technical information rectified after the meeting. It probably rectified only because the SCRD was there and part of that meeting. And I think that we need to, going forward from this, ensure that we lobby hard with the province to be recognized as orders of government that have a seat at the table. And, one example that I have in Gibson's here is a RCMP contract coming up. We had a meeting with the ministry and I said, well, okay, the ministry, we're going to talk to the RCMP and we'll decide what the level of policing you're going to need in the community is, and then we'll come and present that to you. And I said, really, we need to be at that table. We need to talk about the level of policing in our community when it is being discussed, not respond to a proposal. And this is what I see happening. Another one we had relative to the aquifer, we met with the Ministry of Environment about concerns about activities on the aquifer. And they said, well, if only you had aquifer protection, then we would be aware of it. And then we would respond. Wait a minute. We are talking to the other guys about aquifer protection. Why aren't we all sharing this information? And so it's one of those things I think I really would encourage when we have these conversations to watch for these opportunities and just try to put the foot in there and say, hey, we need to be part of these conversations from initiation, not catch up, not an afterthought, not a third party to conversations that affect us and all of our communities and our residents. So just interested to see that in this report here that just doubles that down for me. So we all need to be part of the same conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to add that we all need the same information too, because the whole business with Aquifer 670 being redefined caught me a little by surprise. I wasn't aware of it. I don't think we've had a report on it to the SCRD board. And so I would appreciate it in future sometime when it's at a logical time if perhaps infrastructure could give us an update on Aquifer 670, which I'm going to suggest should be called the Elphinstone Aquifer. Folks are calling it the Gibsons Aquifer, but it rises off the slopes of Mount Elphinstone and it serves areas E, F, and Gibsons. So I'm going to start calling it the Elphinstone Aquifer. I did have one additional question about Church Road, which is the original schedule for construction on this project was such that most of the disruption to roads would happen in the off season, but it looks like that may not be the case. Do we know if we get approval in the next few weeks or 2 months, what that's going to look like for the construction schedule?
I'm going to pass this on to Andrew Mizurek.
Thank you for the question. So that's to be determined, I guess, based on the contractor schedule. But we're looking at probably a 6-week bidding period from the time that we basically get the license. We have to do some internal housekeeping to get it out to bid and stuff like that, tendering. So that's probably 2 months from the time that we would, receive license approval before we can actually authorize and get a contract before the board. So then that's 2 months out, and then probably another, I'd say, a few months beyond that from the time that we start, actually laying pipe into the areas you're referring to, which is, I believe, Reed Road in particular. So that would probably put it into closer to the spring time frame, probably early summer, at which that work would continue, and which would be within that area that you've been asking about or concerned about. So part of the plan, we have a requirement in the contract specifications is for the contractor to provide a detour plan and also, public notification and stuff like that as part of their construction efforts, and be cognizant of rerouting traffic and the impacts to the motorists and stuff like that in the public. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I think we would all love to avoid closing parts of Reed Road in July and August, because that just, the very thought of it makes me break out in a cold sweat. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I've been curious about a couple things, so I'd like to take this opportunity to ask, is there something we could do to speed the whole darn thing up prior to license issuing, and assume the financial risk ourselves, but perhaps with the option of using, if we miss, we can use it elsewhere. So what I'm thinking about is, could we buy the pipe? Could we buy the pump, with the understanding if it didn't work at Church, we could use it at Langdale? And so write the contract so we take the financial risk, but hopefully mitigate it by reuse, hopefully in the future, because the waiting seems to be the longest part of this. So is there something we can do to move ahead? So thank you.
Thank you. I can answer that question, and I alluded to it a little bit in the report itself on in the timeline for next steps section. The moment we receive clarity from the nation and as well as the province that on the technical side they have no further questions or concerns, the SRD could consider to start the procurement process for a contractor, while during when the province is actually preparing the final documents, etc., etc. I think that's a risk that the SRD should consider at that point in time. Prior to that, I don't think that there is that it is realistic to start procuring materials like pumps, etc., because that's all the responsibility to the contractor, and from a liability perspective, that's not something that the SRD would. I suggest the SRD should take on. So, where you can expedite stuff, the process is at the time that we have clarity on that there is no further changes required to our scope of work, or no major changes.
Thank you. Right, seeing no more questions in the queue, I am going to allow one of our panelists to speak, and I'll ask you to have a brief and pertinent question. Thank you.
Hi. My question is about the Seashelt Aquatic Center. I noticed you referred to the arena, but the aquatic center is also, as I understand it, limited in its opening until there's proper water supply, but there's an enormous number of users of that facility, many of them elderly, for whom swimming is a important health consideration. So I wonder if you've given priority consideration to providing water to the Sea Shelter Aquatic Center.
Thank you very much. I think I can say safely that once we're off of stage 4, that will be one of our first priorities, is to get the pool running again. Do we know how long it takes us from the moment that we're back to stage 3 until the pool would be functional? Oh, look, our GM of Community Services has just appeared.
Good morning. Remco, is it all right if I step in here? Thank you for the question, and I appreciate the community's concern for the Sea Shelter Aquatic Center. So we are taking both facilities, the Sea Shelter Aquatic Center and the Sea Shelter Arena, in 2-week sort of increments. So the reason that the Sea Shelter Aquatic Center was not restarted was that in order for us to do a flushing of the pool after our shutdown, where we did some work, we didn't empty the pool, but we did do some work around the pool. It does take a significant amount of water. And so with the restrictions, the decision was made to hold off on that. So we are again taking those in 2-week increments. So once we get an update next week from GM Rosenboom and the EOC, we'll be able to explore when we can open. We do need to bring back in a contractor to do the work, so we are going to be at the mercy of their availability as well. But definitely appreciate it's a priority for the community, and it is on our radar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, folks, it's not quite 10:30, and we've got an agenda to go through. So unless there are more water questions, the next thing up, Director GM Rosenboom.
I need to unmute myself. There was a question from Director Toth on how commercial versus residential is determined, how it's determined that somebody is a commercial user. And our CFO is currently joined us. So Tina, would you be able to answer that question?
So the question was how businesses can become commercial?
Yep, correct.
So right now, I believe businesses are charged a flat rate, and commercial are then metered. And so I believe we would have to, it depends where the location of the business is. And so obviously with the metering project happening in sometime soon for the area of Sea Shelter and the nation, perhaps those particular meters or businesses would then be metered. So right now, businesses in rural areas would probably have a meter situated there. So we couldn't just pivot to this. Plus our bylaw would likely have to be modified as well to reflect this, because it's not, I think, explicit in there as well as definition. So we'd probably have to do a little bit of housekeeping there on that. So I'm not sure if that's the crux of the question.
Chair, if I may. My question was sort of around, we recognize, the list that was presented by GM Rosenboom had residential, had some commercial, had some institutional. The question was really around, the commercial, how a property gets designated within the water utility as commercial. And GM Rosenboom had indicated that it was basically if somebody was on volumetric billing already. And so my question was, if I move to the coast, if I start an orchard in, Roberts Creek on 5 or 8 acres of residential land, and I start producing fruit to sell, like, we don't have business licenses in our rural areas. So how do we determine if somebody is indeed a commercial enterprise and therefore should be moved to the volumetric billing system?
I'm not sure that's a financial question. I think it's more of a question of when the applicant comes for a water application, and if there's any modifications to the connection or what type of use it's going to be. I believe, and I would pass on to the GM, I believe it's the type of infrastructure that's put in there is really some of the factors that determine that. So I would ask him to validate.
Go.
Validated. It's as indicated prior. It's the commercial are usually residential are 3/4 or an inch connection, so they can only handle a certain amount of flow. The moment a larger is installed, the switch to a volumetric rate structure and hence commercial billing. Hence are listed as commercial currently in our system.
I'm just going to follow up here because I have a lot of historical anomalies in my area. I have several RV or mobile home parks that are not zoned commercial and presumably are getting residential service, and a number of businesses that have never been zoned. And I realize that the zoning is not driving this, but it's pretty clear that we're going to need to review who the heck is residential and who isn't. Because it's pretty clear that even with a small pipe, we can deliver an awful lot of water to a residential property. Director Toth?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that, you can pass 1,400 gallons an hour through a 3/4 inch pipe connection. So, you can use a lot of water on a 3/4 inch pipe connection. But I'll park it for now. My other question procedurally is, did we vote on the recommendations here already?
No, we didn't. And thank you for reminding me. So we have a motion on the floor. I beg your pardon, people, for losing track. So, all in favor of the motion on the floor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much, staff, for moving forward the Church Road project as fast as you can under the circumstances. So, all right. Next item on our agenda is item 4, grant results for downstream flood analysis of Chapman, Edwards, McNeil, and Harris Lake dams. And who's up for that report?
That'll be me, Board Chair McBain. Thank you again. I am pleased to provide to you 2 grant acceptances for board approval. Both grants are from a union of BC municipalities. The first grant is in the amount of $143,000 and is for the completion of the downstream flood analysis for the Chapman, Edwards, McNeil, and Harris Lake dams. This work is currently underway with a consultant and is expected to be completed by the end of this year and is a component of a larger dam safety improvement design project that's underway. The second grant in the amount of $253,000 is for the completion of the planning enhancement project. Staff will be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Grant money, good. We get that. Director Ties.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions. I just want to move the recommendations as listed on page 1.
And I see a seconder, Director Pratt. Do we have any further questions, discussion? Seeing none. Thank you very much, staff, for the good work. I'm calling the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next up, we have RFP for the South Coast Green Waste Drop-Off Depot. And I'm just going to editorialize again briefly to say that the term green waste applied to this drop-off depot is confusing because people are confused.
Sorry, Chair. We actually have contract award for the water treatment plant hypochlorite generation first.
We do.
Annex B.
Annex B and Annex.
I beg your pardon, I'm having trouble with the PDF reader. I apologize. So, all right. Hypochlorite generation report, and that is over to Mr. Miseriak again. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Presented for your review and action is a construction award for the Chapman Water Treatment Plant on-site hypo generation project and a consultant engineering services contract award for the construction management and post-construction closeout services contracts. A total of 3 tenders were submitted, and the lowest responsive tender price submitted was from CHB Services in the amount of $964,500, excluding contingency and taxes. The staff recommendation before you is to include a 16% construction contingency to account for any unforeseen changes in the construction award for a revised contract value not to exceed $1,118,820, excluding taxes. The current contract with Associated Engineering is also recommended to be amended to provide for the required construction management and closeout services. Given the current and anticipated workload of the Capital Projects Division, coupled with a deficit of 2 engineering staff members, the division is unable to provide the necessary construction management oversight required for this project. Associated scope of services will provide that construction management. Staff will be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I see any questions? Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. The question is on page 7. It's about, you could just make a comment on the current market material price volatility and the significance to this contract.
Correct. So thank you for the question. It is, prices are hard to, I guess, maintain a current pricing. It is subject to change, and this is the current situation with this current contractor. For example, he had a price reduction in his bid for the major component of this work, but it's contingent upon the award happening, in a timely manner, as an example, in answer to your question. So the price is subject to change just because of COVID and other outside factors.
Just to follow up, so acting quickly is important in this volatile market. Is that the summary of?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see Director Seegers.
Thank you. My question is not with regards to the recommendations, but something in the report after. So once we move this forward, I'd like to come back and ask my question.
Okay, in that case, we would need a motion.
I'll move the recommendations as on page 5.
And I see many seconders. Thank you. Is there any further discussion of the motion on the floor? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion? Any opposed? Seeing no one opposed, that passes. Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. On page 6, and staff will probably have to go away and find this answer. Under analysis, first paragraph, last sentence, says the ITT was issued during the transition period for proactive release of bid information. As such, this information is not included in this report. I'd like to know at what date that was implemented and when we can, I recognize that some of these were issued prior and so didn't reflect that. I'd like to know what date we will start having that information coming forward. And staff can come back with that. Thank you.
GM Rosenboom.
Thank you for the question. When the board made the decision to implement these changes, it was noticed that there would be some that were already in the process of being tendered, so the information was not included yet. And I think this is one of the last ones that didn't have that included yet. And I know that there are other tender or award reports where they present to the board that already have the information in there because they had a shorter timeline. So it's definitely currently part of the standard process to have that included. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did raise the question on page 6 of the staff report. It mentioned a deficit of 2 capital project technicians, which, given the amount of workload we've had around here, must be pretty challenging. So I was just wondering when we hope to have our deficit filled.
Thank you for the question, Chair. We posted several times to fill this position. I think we're now in our 3rd round of postings, and there's significant competition for the qualifications we're looking for within the industry, as well as within local governments. So far we've not been successful yet. Recently, another round of another posting for this position closed, and we're currently reviewing those applications and are so we're hopeful that there's somebody in there that's qualified and willing to fill one of these positions.
Good. Thank you very much. All right. I see nothing further on that item. So let's move on to the Langdale Well and Pump Station Improvements Project update.
Thank you, Chair McBain. The purpose of this report is to seek a contract amendment for the construction phase of the Langdale Well and Pump Station Improvement Project to account for some pipe realignment and other minor out-of-scope contract work that occurred during construction of the pump house and well improvements. At the time of construction award, there was a $20,000 construction contingency that was allocated for this project but was inadvertently omitted in the construction contract award amount. The out-of-scope items were tracked and approved by the project manager so as not to impede the forward progress of the ongoing work. The well replacement and station improvements were completed in early April and has been operating without any issues. The requested contract amendment can be funded from the construction contingency. And again, staff is available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or motions? Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. First, a question, and then happy to move the recommendation. The question is, could you say anything about how the new installation, how the improvements have affected the output of the pumps? Is there any there was some hope that this would increase volume, so I was wondering if what the results of the improvements are.
Thank you for the question. So yes, the new pump and motor is basically an energy efficient motor. For example, we went from a 60 horsepower motor to a 45 or 40 horsepower motor. So that alone, we have yet to quantify how much electrical savings we have, but that coupled with like operational improvements, we went from a fixed speed drive to a variable speed drive. So the pump is operating more efficiently on its operating curve. And to ask in particular, how is it pumping? It's actually pumping probably 85% of its ultimate capacity at this point in time. So it's operating very well and efficiently. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much.
Shall I move? Happy to move recommendations on page 8 as presented.
I see a seconder. Thank you very much. All in favor of this motion? And we're all in favor. Thank you very much. Excellent. We love good news, especially when it's good news about water. I've had a request because we are now moving on to solid waste to take a short break. So it's now 10:40. So I'm going to call a 10-minute break and we'll be back at 10:50. Thank you.
please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. We are resuming our Thursday, September 9th infrastructure meeting. And the next item up is the contract award for site operations for the South Coast Green Waste drop-off site. And I will, with apologies, editorialize or start editorializing again. Just that the term green waste is causing, at least in my area, a lot of confusion between the curbside green waste pickup and the green waste drop-off. So, you know, I suggest that perhaps we should look at calling this the garden waste drop-off. I see, Director Beamish, that you have your hand up.
Oh, no, I don't want to interrupt the presentation, so I'm willing to wait. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. So, that said, we have the report at hand, and is this GM Rosenboom or is this Manager Cooper?
Thank you, Chair McMahon. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on the outcome of the request for proposals for site operation services for the SCRD South Coast Green Waste Drop-Off Depot and seek approval of the execution of a contract for the site operation services. The RFP was issued based on the current service level. However, the RFP included the opportunity to provide pricing and details for some optional services based on prior board direction. If the proponent provided a response to those optional services, discussions could take place if a contract is awarded. The report provides details of the request for proposal, including the summary of the one proposal that was submitted, as well as a summary of tonnage and financial considerations. Should the contract be awarded, transition to the new operator would occur for October 1st of this year. Should the contract not be awarded, the site would close at the end of September. Thank you, and staff are happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Director Beamish.
Two things. One is that we are getting some, and I don't know if the regional district has received inquiries from one of the nearby residents, but there is concern coming on that about the traffic volume coming up in there. And I don't know if there's a way to solve that, but I just want to put that on the radar to the SCRD if they haven't heard that. The second thing is I was interested that there's going to be some video surveillance of the site to ensure promote compliance and also look at the service standards. I guess that's very similar to what I suggested in terms of watching the dump, the landfill, relative to the abuses in terms of I think it was the asbestos and things like that going in the mix. And I'm just wondering, is there a difference there between the two sites as to why video surveillance could be used here and not at the landfill?
Thank you for the question. I think the ultimate approach is here is not that the ultimate expectations from the contractor, because to be sure, this is a proposal from the contractor and it's part of the proposal. So it's up to the board to accept the proposal as is or not. I think the idea is here not to, it's more to deter non-compliance, but it's not to enforce it in a way that, because there is no penalization or whatever possible if somebody is bringing in materials that are not in line with what is allowed on the site, because there's no site operator available. I think the primary purpose is site safety as well as monitoring the if the bins are full or not. I think an additional benefit, as described in the bid, is that it might deter people from bringing in materials that are not supposed to be brought in, because there could be a phone call afterwards if they, for example, drive an identifiable truck with a logo in it or on something. But if somebody brings in just with a regular car materials that are not supposed to be brought in, it's the responsibility for the operator to deal with those materials, and there's no follow-up possible. And the difference with asbestos containing materials is that you cannot identify materials if they contain asbestos or not through a surveillance camera. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could follow up, I think that wasn't the reason why the surveillance camera wasn't a good idea with the landfill. It was because we don't do surveillance.
Yeah.
But yeah. The other thing is that I guess, are we allowing commercial loads then to go into the Greenway site? And is that part of the surveillance process? If they're not allowed there, will we be tracking that?
Thank you for the question. What is allowed or not on the site is set by our bylaw, and our bylaw currently does not allow it. And that's part of the further discussion that can be held. That if there are bylaw amendments proposed or not. But currently, it's set by the bylaw, and I think the surveillance or not is not really having an impact there.
Thank you.
I have a follow-up question about surveillance. First, I assume it would have to be approved by our corporate officer in terms of privacy legislation. And secondly, if they were doing video surveillance, would that give them an opportunity to have a record of who and how many users are using the site? Because that's data that we don't have right now.
Thank you for the question. There is no counter on the surveillance, and I'm not sure if somebody would need to watch the surveillance 24/7 or at least all the time during operating hours, and that's not happening. So I don't think that it's not functioning as a counter for the actual use of the site. In terms of the privacy regulations, SRD staff is currently reviewing the roles and responsibility of us as the service provider versus the contractor who is actually providing the service on our behalf, in terms of who's ultimately responsible for making sure that all privacy legislation is followed. And so that we'll make sure that as part of our contract execution, it's ensured that all privacy regulations are followed. So, and it could be that it is all that in the current setup, it's all the responsibility of the contractor to make sure that everything is in place.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. My question is just one of curiosity. In the table 2, we see that there's 130,000 for processing. I was wondering if the same company was doing the site operations. Is there still a need for processing? Or in other words, what's the difference between the two?
Thanks for the question. The site operation services, so for the RFP, is to operate and oversee the South Coast Green Waste Drop-Off Depot. The processing contract is processing all of the green waste that is collected at all of the SCRD sites that are transported to the processor, which is Salish Lids. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. So as I understand it, this contract award would allow a continuation of service. And so my follow-up to that is the board is looking for a fee, a service funding model of tipping fees. So how does this contract lead towards that as a goal that the board has set?
Manager Cooper, if you can start and I can follow up if needed.
Thank you, GM Rosenboom. So as was mentioned, the RFP included the optional services. So one of those options was how would you or how could you either accept fees, be that be a flat rate or a tipping fee. So again, if the contract is awarded, then those discussions can be held with the proponent, and then staff would bring forward a report outlining what some options are, and then does that affect the contract rate, et cetera, and that would all be brought forward for the board's consideration for not just this portion, but the entire green waste program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm going through the report. What is the term of the contract?
Thanks for the question. 3 years.
3 years. Okay.
With options to extend. Thanks.
Good. All right, Director Seegers.
I'm happy to move the recommendations on page 10.
And I see a seconder. Thank you. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Good, thank you. That's everyone. That passes. So, next item up is the home composter rebate pilot program update.
Thank you, Chair McMahon. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an update on the SCRD's 2021 home composter rebate pilot program and seek board direction regarding the future of the program. So the report provides a summary of the scope of the program, the number of composters requested by composter type for each local government, as well as 2 options regarding the future of the program for the committee's consideration. As of the end of August, staff had received 51 applications from a variety of local governments, or residents within those local governments, and for 8 different composter types. Staff continue to receive applications, and based on the early success, staff recommend to bring forward a proposal in the form of a proposed initiative to the 2022 budget process for consideration. Thank you, and staff are happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you. Composter questions. Director Ties.
Yes, thank you. And I think this is a worthwhile pursuit. I think ultimately composting is still better than getting your food waste picked up at the curb. So my question is to what extent do the applications for the grant or the subsidy include measures to make sure that wildlife does not get into whatever structure is being built? And I'm especially worried about the own builds that could, create rat or bear problems depending on how they're built.
Thanks for the question. As part of the webpage for the rebate program, there's a list of resources, including how to be wild safe with your home composter, as well as really detailed information regarding the types of composters and the amount of effort that's required to keep that composter, keeping in mind wild safe considerations. So there's that upfront information, and then as well as during conversation and through that process as well, when folks have provided what type of composter, that's part of the conversation, is ensuring that they understand what types of materials are best for that type of compost unit. As well, if they do have any questions we offer that are sort of outside of our abilities, we do offer the contact information for the Wild Safe BC coordinator, who's more than happy to chat with the folks. Thanks.
Thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I have 2 questions. If it's the same initiative multi-year, it would still be the same one-time initiative. So can't we continue to use the eco fee reserves?
Yeah.
Thanks for the question. GM Rosenboom might have further to add. As my understanding is that offering a rebate program for more than 1 year would make it ongoing and therefore would not be eligible for the eco fee reserves, which are for one-time programs. Thank you.
So we couldn't just say, okay, this is a 5-year program and use the eco fee. Okay. GM Rosenboom is shaking his head. I got my question. My second question is, the electric composter is basically an in-home solution. And it avoids the wildlife issues and all those kind of things, and also encourages the use of it through the fact that it's more convenient. So I was wondering, could we just make the rebate higher for the electric to encourage more of those more environmentally friendly options?
Thanks for the question. Staff could include that in the proposed initiative, outlining some options for how the program could move forward with differing rebate levels based on an indoor versus an outdoor composter. We can note that and include it.
I'd like to see that. I wonder about the other directors, what they think.
It's a little difficult for me to manage the speakers list at this point. GM Rosenboom.
Thank you. My proposal is to defer the discussion on the actual scope of the follow-up project on based on the proposal and the proposed initiative that's being brought forward as part of the budget process, just in terms of timing.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for the rescue. I had a question, which is, do we do any follow-up on these grants, especially considering the wide variety of different composter types? Is there any intention to go back to these people after 3 or 4 or 5 years and ask them about what their experience is with these composters, whether it worked out, whether they would recommend it in future?
Thanks for the question. The long-term follow-up has not been included at this time, but I know there's a few of the composter types that I'm not familiar with that I would like to know, do they work or in the long term? So depending on sort of staff capacity to do so, we can note that for some follow-up in the future, especially on the ones that staff are not familiar with. Thanks.
Good. Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and as I'm along with Director Ties that home composting is a desirable outcome that we're trying to achieve on site. And my question is about the connection between the home composter program and what's it called, RIP, the Waste Reduction Initiative plan. There's seem to be some parallel things going on, but could you just sort of sort them out for us, one versus the other?
Thanks for the question. So the Waste Reduction Initiatives program will be coming forward as part of the budget process as a proposed initiative as well, because it was identified as an ongoing program to be funded from taxation as opposed to the eco fees. The RIP is open to nonprofits. So that's the big difference, is that the home composter rebate program is for homeowners. RIP is available to, say, nonprofits, community organization, school PACs, etc. Thank you.
And to follow up, so the communications of this would ultimately tie those things together so that the public knows where they're trying to apply to. That would be an assumption.
Thanks. Yes, should both of those programs be supported and approved in the 2022 budget process, then in our communications moving forward with each of those programs, we would clearly outline the different options and who would be available for what type of programs. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to put in a question. I do support this program, and I particularly think that 1 year is not long enough when we're rolling out a program like this to determine, how successful it is, because it does take some time for people to recognize the program and make their plans. But we only see the direct cost. The direct cost of the rebates is $4,400, but do we have any idea what the cost to us is in terms of staff time?
Thanks for the question. It's approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours of staff time from the receipt of the application to the issuing of the rebate check. Thank you.
And for the setup of the program?
Setup of the program, which should the program move forward, would be minor moving forward. It would just be updating application forms and some minor adjustments to the web page. In terms of the number of hours to set it up, it would be estimated, between 5 to 10, based on we were able to model it after existing rebate programs that the SCRD had, so that the initial setup was less than it would have been had we not had that to model after. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Director Seegers.
I'd like to move the recommendations on page 14.
We need an option 1 or option 2.
Sorry.
Do we not?
Staff bring forward a home composter rebate program proposal, I think, which is option 1.
That is option 1. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I see that seconded. All those in favor? Good. That passes. Thank you very much. And now we move on to transit. So we have the 2022 Transit Improvement Program recommendations. And is that going to be Jim Gagnon?
Good morning. I am very pleased to introduce the 2022 Transit Improvement Program, or TIPS, recommendation report. I would like to start by acknowledging that Mr. Rob Rigma, Senior Manager of Government Relations with BC Transit, has chimed into the meeting and is joined along with Manager Walton. And I wanted to take this opportunity to thank both of these gentlemen for their patience with me as I have worked my way through our agreements and our working relationship, and have bombarded them with many questions, and they've graciously answered them and provided history and context to further my understanding. This is a complex process. The timing is often awkward and not necessarily in alignment with our planning processes. And I do look forward to an upcoming board workshop where we might work through some of these questions further. But in the meantime, the last 2 transit improvement recommendations were considered by the board. One in 2017, when Route 90 frequency expanded to 30 minutes at peak time and Route 1 hourly service was implemented. And then again in 2019, following the completion of the Cowrie Road extension, when Route 2 was expanded to provide service to Chatlet School. And since that time, and with the COVID pandemic, no further expansions have been considered. As per the diagram on the first page of the report, which is page 18 of your report, the TIPS priority, or the Transit Improvement Program priorities, are normally presented to us by BC Transit in the spring of each year. And recommendations for expansion opportunities are based on several factors, including the identified priorities in the Transit Future Action Plan, ridership data, system and route performance, existing and future resource availability, and also financial implications. Unfortunately, COVID has affected many things, including the TIPS process timelines, in that they were delayed, and we didn't receive this information from BC Transit until late August. And at that time, the financial calculations were unavailable. Further, the SCRD is in a unique timing situation where we are currently working with BC Transit to revisit our Transit Future Action Plan and readjust our priorities based on community feedback. Once these priorities are finalized and approved by the board, which is anticipated for Q1 of 2022, BC Transit and administration, as well as the board, will use this information along with the other factors previously identified, and in the spring, begin discussions regarding the next 3 years of expansion opportunities through the Transit Improvement Program. The choice to expand programs is at 100% at the discretion of the local government to consider amongst all its other priorities, resources, and financial capacity, and there is no pressure from BC Transit to expand. The TIPS recommendations provided for you today are based on the old Transit Future Action Plan priorities, which potentially might be the same priorities that arise in the plan revision underway right now. The board can choose to commit in principle to these TIP priorities presented, or to delay considerations until the spring of 2022, when the next TIPS planning cycle begins. Waiting until the spring to explore expansion opportunities will provide more time to attain further clarity on the priorities of the community through the Transit Future Action Plan. More time for planning to address the internal challenges anticipated with expansion, things like infrastructure, human resource shortages. More time to further understand the financial impact of the recommended expansion, both from a service level costing and from an organizational impact. And a bit more time to weather the storm of the lingering COVID implications. The drawback of waiting till the spring is that implementation of expansion priorities will take longer. An example of that is if the expansion priority requires additional buses, it can take up to over a year to get those buses. Something to consider is that if you make a commitment to expand where there is a bus required, BC Transit needs to move forward in ordering those buses. And if we choose at a later date to change our decision about our commitment, we may be held liable for up to 1 year lease payment on those buses. This can often be avoided if BC Transit can find another operator willing to utilize the buses, but it is a risk that needs to be considered. Mr. Walton and I have prioritized planning for any expansion consideration in the first 2 quarters of 2020, including the consideration of expansion for both service delivery structures as well as our infrastructure at Mason Yards. And so considering all of this, administration is recommending that the board delay expansion discussions until the spring of 2022. And at this time, both myself and Manager Walton are available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for that introduction. And I see the hands popping up. So first up is Director Theis.
Well, I agree with GM Gagnon and Manager Walton, and I think that any expansion needs to be looked at through the lens of a data-driven approach. And since we're lacking the data, I'm happy to move the recommendations, but I'll defer on that until the speakers list has died down somewhat.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I understand exactly what you're saying around delaying until we have the future needs identified in the Transit Future Action Plan. However, I'm not happy with the delay. If we look at spring of next year for a proposal to come forward, we're probably looking at 1 to 2 years for implementation. So we're actually talking 3-4 years down the road for any implementation of changes. And again, because of the timing, budgets, all those kinds of things. I think one of the routes that we could move forward with expansion would be Route 90. So Route 90 was to be the spine of the system on the Sunshine Coast. And initially it was looking to do 30-minute frequency at peak times, but then increase frequency in the next iteration. That all stopped and COVID came in. We didn't have the ridership, but I think any plans we have going forward, this spine is going to be critical. When we look at doing routes through Roberts Creek, routes up Seashelt Inlet, expanding the service potentially in West Seashelt or out to Pender Harbor and Egmont. That spine is going to be critical. So if we were to actually say, yes, we want to do this now, it would then, I guess what I'm looking at is what would the timing be? If we say we want to move this Route 90, increase the frequency on Route 90, what kind of timing are we looking at? We're looking at a budget proposal on our side coming forward next year, or do we wait still until the plan comes forward? If we say, yes, we want to do this now, when would it actually be in operation?
Thank you for the question. So my understanding of the process, if we were to commit in principle to it now, we would begin the discussions with BC Transit around the financial implication of that. They would also prep to order any potential buses that would be required for that expansion. And most likely, based on when I've looked at sort of the other expansion opportunities that have happened and how long it's taken to implement it, I would suggest that it would also have to go through our budgeting cycle And so I would say that we're looking at the beginning of 2023 to actually implement. Manager Walton, do you have any further comments, or is that your understanding as well?
Thank you, GM Gagnon. That's my understanding as well. The earliest we can implement any service expansion would be 2023 to implement the actual service.
Okay,
so a delay now. Oh, sorry, Director Seeger.
Sorry, follow up. So yeah, follow up to that is if we say now we're going to wait until spring, we're looking at 2024.
Yes, I believe you are correct there.
Right. So given that we're still looking at, well, 2 years out and probably fall of that year, I think this is going to be key. So I mean, I'd like to put it to the board to say, you know, do we wait for the transit future plan and push it out another year, or do we recognize that this is one of the key pieces of the whole expansion, and look at putting this in?
Thank you. I see Mr. Ringma has his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the opportunity and good question, Director Seegers. Staff is correct. In this current situation, we'd be looking at a earliest implementation of January 2023. If we went to, if we waited till the spring of next year for the TFAP recommendations to further refine your transit improvement opportunities, those would go into basically our cycle of budgeting for that summer. So we would get you the costing and the numbers you need in 2022 for the earliest implementation. So if we did delay it 1 year, the earliest implementation we'd be looking at would be around September of 2023. So not quite into 2024, but it would be late 2023.
Thank you for that clarification. Where are we? Could staff help us a little? Where are we on the public consultation about the transit future action plan? I have attempted to take the survey twice and given up, but what other portions of the public consultation are taking place, and how are people participating?
Sure, I'm happy to give you some feedback on that. Thank you for the question. So as of yesterday, BC Transit reported that engagement was trending quite high compared to their normal experience around surveys. We've had about 1,200 visits to the website, in which more than 50% of those visits, or the hits, have actually what they called gained information, and they gauge that by how much time they spend on the site and how much they click around the site. We've also had more than 30% of our visits contribute to the survey, and 271 surveys are completed to date. So we're very encouraged by the amount of participation that we've had. We won't know until the survey closes how many hard copy surveys we get back. So as you know, those are available in various locations. So far, we're actually very encouraged by the survey engagement, and it is a complex survey. I understand that. But I have to defer to the expertise of BC Transit in that they have delivered surveys like this all the time across the province, and in many cases have indicated that their surveys can actually be more complex than this, depending upon the complexity of the service being provided. And with the SCRD having such a large geographical area with multiple communities and jurisdictions, it's complex. And so we understand that, but we are excited and encouraged by the amount of participation we've had so far.
Good, thank you. And is there information on the buses for those people who are not online to encourage them to fill out the?
Yeah, I believe we have posters up in a variety of locations and areas for sure, trying to understand not everybody has access to the internet and website, etc. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. I guess I'm asking staff if they can use a little bit of 2020 hindsight to look at our past kind of expansions and go. I seem to recall some issues around taxation and not being totally prepared to do the expansion, not having all the pieces in place. So if you could kind of highlight something from past use that 2020 hindsight. If you could say some words about that.
Certainly. Thank you for the question. So the 2020 hindsight for me is my learnings of the past 3 months and what I've been able to glean. But I've had some great conversations with Mr. Igma and Mr. Walton. So in terms of the process, BC Transit has worked through some of the costing now from their end. And what it will take now for Mr. Walton and I is to work through the costing from our end in terms of what are those triggers in terms of the amount of hours and expansion that would trigger extra resources required. So for example, how many more hours requires an extra dispatch? How many more hours requires more garage time? How many more buses impact our infrastructure from a Mason Yards perspective? And so that is the work that we need to do, and we've identified as a priority that needs to be done to be able to put sort of our side of the equation together and then meld that with BC Transit's side of the equation so that we can begin the negotiations around where we want to expand, what we want to do. So those are the pieces that need to be put together. And the piece that in all honesty, we are missing is our own triggers. And with Mr. Walton being relatively new, myself being relatively new, we've identified that's a priority for us. We also know that there are some challenges potentially in the future with Mason Yards and the capacity at the yards, but we do know that we could probably squeeze in a bus or two at this point in time, but any further expansion, we're going to be challenged. And so that has been identified as well by senior leadership as something that we need to begin to plan for next year. So I hope that answers your question, because there's lots of factors that need to be built in.
Thank you. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I have no problems admitting that wrapping my head around the transit system continues to provide challenges for me. You know, we've got the AOA tips, the transit future plans. You know, there's a lot of initialisms in there. And yeah, they continue to whatever. Looking at tips, recognizing it's an opportunity to do some, review of the service, implement any incremental improvements, things like that are available. Is that purely an internal review, or is there an opportunity for public participation? I'll ask that question, and then I've just got a comment to follow up that.
So the review around tips is internal between BC Transit and the SCRD. The public participation piece is really this Transit Future Action Plan that we're doing right now, and the engagement that we're doing with the public to understand what their priorities are. Then it becomes our responsibility to sift through those priorities with BC Transit around the costing, the resources and infrastructure required. And then it really becomes the board's responsibility to sift through how that priority fits in with all their other priorities.
Thank you. So just a follow-up comment then, if I may, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay. I've received some communication from members of the public asking, well, why doesn't BC Transit and the SCRD do this? Or, why don't we circularize our routes through, West Seashelt and the shores and the arena, things like that. And so this, the Transit Future Action Plan is really the opportunity that people should be using to bring these things forward. But I'm also hearing that this once every 3 or 4 or 7 year cycle is the only opportunity for people to bring things like that forward for consideration or discussion. Is that sort of fundamentally correct?
So I would have to say that from a formalized process, when the Transit Future Action Plan is revised, it's a formal opportunity for the public to bring forward their feedback. That opportunity always exists, however, for the public to bring forward their feedback, whether that's through a customer service, request through email. We gather those kind of comments together everywhere. I do it in parks, I do it in transit, so that as we on an annual basis do our planning, we take those into consideration. I also know that the public sends their requests through you guys, and you often forward those to us. And so when we sit down to plan, we look at those that we've tracked, and we keep all of that into consideration as we plan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll add on that same topic, something that has been discussed quite a bit in the last year or two is transit connection right through to Earl's Cove. Some sort of a regional transit project that would involve local government and other partners. Is that on the table?
So those partners were invited right up into Powell River, invited to participate in the Transit Future Action Plan. They were also invited to participate on the project committee. Unfortunately, there was no uptake on that. But I am going to defer to Manager Walton to see if there was anything further he wanted to add to that, or even Remco or GM Remco. What is your name? GM Rosenblum.
Really nothing further to comment on. The invites were sent out. Low participation in the project working group. We did have one group attend the first meeting, but other than that, there's been no uptick. All information has been sent to those stakeholders to provide to their people to participate in the survey, and we're hoping that they take a chance to do that indeed, because that will drive our priorities going forward.
I also want to add to that that we made a concerted effort to reach out to the Youth Voice Committee as well as the high schools and schools to see if we could get some uptake from our youth, because I know that's also been on the board's radar. So,
thank you very much, Director Seegers.
Thank you. So, follow up to the conversation before about moving things forward now versus waiting till the spring. What I'm hearing is it would delay about 8 months. Is that correct? Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, I believe that Mr. Ingma said a delay, the earliest would be the fall of 2023, whereas if we went right now, the earliest would be around January, February of 2023.
Okay. Okay. I understand from that. One of the things I wanted to mention, and that's just because you're fairly new here, I don't know where this conversation is in the regional district. The District of Sechelt is in the process of moving forward with our Public Works and Parks building on the lot that we have up on Dusty Road, and there is additional room there. We own a fairly large piece of property there, and I know that during COVID, we had initiated a conversation of potentially joint use of that site. So I know that when we were looking at doing the design of the building that we're putting up there, that we stressed that we wanted it to be something that was expandable. So we're in the process right now. I think we're finalizing design right now, and it will be going out. Project management's already been hired. We're moving forward with that project. We welcome the regional district on the same lot.
Thank you for that information.
Thank you. And that could be some or all of our operations. We have quite a few things at Mason Road, I understand. Director Tice.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to chime in on timelines, and while I do appreciate that, I think ultimately Route 90 needs to be expanded. I think with the current volumes and the probably very gradual reacceptance of transit as a popular mode of transportation, I think the timelines of starting in early 2023 with whatever expansion would happen would be okay with me.
Thank you. Director Beamish.
Did you get that? The Sunshine Coast Youth Advisory Committee that was formed earlier this year had made comments on transit as well. And I think that would be something if you are able to reach out to them, because they are representative of schools across the board, and it gives them something to also follow up on and be recognized as being a participant in the process.
Thank you for that. We did do that, so hopefully we get some uptake. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask, it's been a little while since we've seen the last statistics on ridership in our transit system. So how is our COVID recovery going here, and how do we compare to the rest of the province?
Well, now you're getting really operational on me, so I am definitely going to defer to Manager Walton to provide some answers, and he may then refer to Mr. Ringma from BC Transit, as they do have the stats.
Thank you for that question. I don't have the exact stats in front of me, as I'll be running them for Q2 and Q3 reports for transit ridership. But the last time I did look, well, I think we're about 80% of annual ridership compared to 2019 levels currently. So 20% down from our current ridership, but far from above the 50% that we dropped down to during the height of COVID. And I don't have any statistics BC wide. Hopefully, Mr. Ringma would be able to provide that.
Yeah, through the chair, I could speak to that. I think Sunshine Coast's recovery rate is actually higher than the provincial average currently. Provincially, we're probably only at about 65% ridership return. What we're seeing in September, as September is usually a big month for transit ridership, just with post-secondaries, secondary schools, we see quite a bump in ridership. So we are seeing a bump in ridership in September, but again, we're up against the other bump that we had in 2019. So I think overall, from BC Transit perspective, ridership recovery is still remaining to be job one. Obviously, this fourth wave and having to go back to mandatory masks on board is a step that we need to take. But we're going to continue to promote the great work and particularly the SCRD is doing in terms of sanitizing and keeping the buses clean, supporting, obviously in the SCRD, we're back to our pre-COVID schedule, which is providing some of that convenience and reliability that our customers are looking for. And we'll just continue to promote transit ridership as an environmentally friendly and effective way for people to get from point A to point B, and just keep pushing that ridership number so that we can, additionally increase some of the revenues that help offset some of your transit costs.
If I may, Chair, I'll just conclude by saying that we will be bringing forward that information through our quarterly reports, and the transit Q2 and Q3 information will be presented with the Community Services quarterly report at the PCD meeting in October.
Thank you very much. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I'm curious as to what the impact of the free ridership for 12 and under in BC will do to our numbers and the plans for School District 46. So I'm hoping that they're very involved in giving us feedback, because given right now they have to pay for transportation, and if 12 and under are free on our system, that may have an impact on their plans going forward. Interesting to find out.
Excellent. Yeah, good point. So what I'm not seeing here is actually anything on the floor. Director Pratt.
I just wanted to just quickly follow up with what Chair Seegers, or with Mayor Seegers. Director Seegers, depending on which committee or table we're sitting at right now, the school district is actually, they're doing a transit, transit study as well at the same time. I'm not sure if that's completed or not, so that will be interesting, especially with the government mandate of the under 12 free. So yeah, so I'm sure there'll be more information coming along as that comes out. So
Director Seegers.
Thank you. Given that it would be only an 8-month delay, I am happy to move recommendation on page 24.
And I see a seconder. Wonderful. If there is no further discussion, last chance to raise your hands. Then I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That passes. Thank you very much.
And Chair McMahon, I need to zip out, and I know Director Beamish did as well, but there's just a ministry meeting that affects the regional district, so I'll be just zipping out for a moment and hopefully be back shortly.
Thank you. Unfortunately, the next item on our agenda is mainly concerning Seashelt. So, the proposed routing change in Seashelt, over to Mr. Walton.
Thank you for that. I'm going to try to get through this. I appear to be losing my voice out of the blue, but nevertheless, at its July 27th, 2021 meeting, the SCRD Mason Road Joint Health and Safety Committee discussed safety and operational concerns for Transit Route 3, Seashell Arena, brought forward by transit operators. The concerns were related to the space constraints of two intersections impacting the ability of the buses to navigate turns without encroaching into oncoming traffic. The specific intersections are at Cowrie Street and Trail Avenue and Wharf Avenue and Dolphin Street, located in the district of Seashelt. The purpose of this report is to present the analysis of these operational concerns and propose route changes to mitigate the associated risks. Staff have acknowledged that there were some confusing maps in the original report, so I'd like to share my screen. Staff created a very quick PowerPoint to hopefully make it a bit easier to understand the proposed changes. So let me just try to make sure I can do that properly here.
Good, thank you.
Thank you, good. Step one. Okay, so this slide here shows the current route that we have, where buses move east on Cowrie and then north up Trail. So it's the one intersection at Cowrie and Trail that we're concerned about. The mitigations and construction work at that intersection were completed by the District of Seashelt in 2020. The intersection is now controlled by a four-way stop and now features curb extensions. The space constraints created by these curb extensions have narrowed the lane widths, impacting the ability for buses to negotiate the turn without encroaching into oncoming traffic. So as stated, the current route in this slide is taking a left onto Trail Avenue, which is our problem intersection. The next slide here is our proposed fix for the intersection of Trail and Cowrie. So this proposed recommendation would have the buses not taking a left on Trail, but continuing eastward along Cowrie Street, and then turning back onto taking a right onto Highway 101, and then coming back to Trail Avenue and taking a right, therefore mitigating that four-way stop. So that's our proposed recommendation to eliminate this risk. Our second area of concern is the intersection of Dolphin and Wharf. And the similar constraint exists for this corner, as when we are taking a right turn from Wharf Avenue onto Dolphin, buses are encroaching into the left-hand turn lane that's on Dolphin Street when people are on Dolphin trying to take a left onto Wharf. What's happening is buses cannot make that turn, and sometimes waiting 2 to 3 lights for that left-hand turn lane to be void, and in order to make that turn. So our fix for this one is on this slide here. So we'd be eliminating the turn onto the right-hand turn onto Dolphin Street and carrying on in a southbound direction along Wharf on Highway 101 all the way around to Shorncliffe Avenue and back to the ending point of Route 3, which is at the exchange on Cowrie Street. One thing to note, by eliminating the right turn onto Dolphin, we would be it would have the elimination of 2 current bus stops for Route 3 only. Those bus stops that would be affected are at Dolphin and Inlet, right by the Canada Post Office, and then the other one at Dolphin and Trail Avenue, which is across from Hackett Park. It must be noted that those stops are still serviced by number 1 and 90, so passengers still have the ability to board and disembark at those stops with those routes. And one benefit of doing this is that the buses going along Highway 101 and then taking it right onto Shorncliffe would allow passengers to stop at Seaside Center and also the Seashelt Aquatic Center, which could be looked at as an improvement on service for some of our passengers. In closing, In closing, I want to advise that the purpose of including BC Transit's letter in staff's report was to demonstrate the support for these operational changes and that the recommended changes will provide a permanent solution to the operational challenges presented. Staff at this time are happy to answer any questions the board may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I see that the Seashell hands are up. So Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. Two things jump out to me looking at the maps. Thank you for the updated maps because, yeah, there definitely was some confusion there looking at it before. The coming in on Shorncliffe, looping around there at the end of the route, I see there being, what's the plan on Saturdays when the farmers market is running? That's the first one. And then similarly, on the way out, Calgary Street is closed, many times a year for events in our downtown core. So what would the plan be, when there's events going on and one or both of those road accesses are closed? Sometimes we have the farmers market and the rest of Calgary Street is closed.
Over to staff.
Thank you very much for that question. I actually had this conversation with my staff this morning, and it's something that we have not taken into account, to be quite frank with you. But being in the operational world, our eyes are on this officially as of this morning, and we will be coming up with a plan to make sure that we provide the best service we can through that area, much as we do now when we have ad hoc situations as well as the farmers market and planned events. So staff are very confident in our operational ability to maintain a level of service that will be beneficial to our patrons.
Follow up, Chair, if I may.
Sure.
Then if that's, let me how to phrase this question. Would it be beneficial then to defer this to have a look at whether there are changes that can be made that can be permanent so that you don't have to reroute buses on event days? Or are you comfortable with us passing these changes, knowing that, coming into Calgary Trail, coming into the exchange is never going to work on a Saturday through the summer and the fall?
Thank you for the follow-up question. Staff are confident in
Uh-oh. Staff are lost. Whoops, he's back.
Oh, good.
I have no idea what happened there. Thank you for the follow-up question. Staff are confident in their recommendations during regular operations because what we focus on is our regular operating schedule. So this is to mitigate our regular operations. And I would think if we were to try to look at rerouting buses based off of the different events that we have, it would be counterproductive and would be a much, much bigger analysis required to permanently change this route to compensate for all the different events along Calgary Street. I think that's something we can look at in the future once we understand priorities and with further expansion. Hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Over to Director Seegers.
Thank you. I bet you anticipated that the directors from Seashell would have questions and comments. I did reach out to staff with regards to the lack of potential or indicated lack of consultation, I guess, with the regional district staff. And staff indicated that actually, no, they had talked with Mr. Walton's predecessor on this. And the first part about the Route 3 going down and coming around Wharf and then to Trail was actually what was decided on by both parties at that time. The other, I have the same question with regards to the farmers market as well, and know that it is a conversation that we're aware of because we're also hearing from our residents up in West Seashelt about the farmers market blocking off the road and issues getting onto the highway. So we are looking. In fact, I'm waiting for a grant proposal response by the end of this month that may help us with some of that. So thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. What I'm looking for now is a motion. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. Discussion is done. I'm happy to, I'm supportive of the recommendations, and we'll move the recommendations on page 24 as presented, yes.
Do I have a seconder? Yes, we have a seconder. Excellent. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. I just missed it in my notes, but I did have one other question, and that was with regards to the turn from Wharf onto Dolphin that exists now. Has that intersection always been a challenge, and it's really only just been identified, we're making changes, let's change this one now as well? And if staff were to change the routing of the bus, maybe it turns up ebb tide and then comes down trail, or doesn't turn at anchor, how many stops are there along Wharf that might be impacted by a more permanent change off of Wharf?
Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. In regards to how long the intersection has been an issue, I can only attest that this information comes to me from transit operators, and unless it's brought to my attention, I assume that everything's great out there in the transit world. This one just happened to come up on my table when the intersection of Wharf and Trail and Cowrie came up, and I thought it would be a great time to include the two at the same time in order just to look at concerns from our operators from an operational perspective and a safety perspective. In regards to the second question, I don't have the data in front of me regarding bus stops and other options for rerouting, but staff, again, are happy to look at those options once we have the Transit Future Action Plan and new priorities and any further expansion. We'd be happy to look at those at that point.
Thank you. Director Seegers.
Thank you. I just want to bring it to staff's attention and to the board's attention. Staff are probably aware of this, but we will be starting construction on Wharf very shortly. This is to put in sidewalks along Wharf itself, and it will align with the Ministry of Transportation's requests for upgrades along that route as well. But that will impact our buses if they are going to be going along Wharf. So change it to change it again.
So we can pass a motion, but we can't win. All right. But in the meantime, can I call the question? All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? That's none. That passes. Thank you very much. We have rerouted the bus. So we are now getting way down our agenda, and we are at the quarterly report, I believe. Am I right about that? Yes. It's a little odd how some of these attachments are in my PDF thing. So, Infrastructure Services Department quarterly report. It was mentioned earlier today that we should emphasize, the good news story that we have been successful in getting some grant funding money. And I believe there are a lot of infrastructure project grant applications in the pipeline right now. So that's great. And we look forward to more good news coming down. And unfortunately, federal grants right now are embargoed due to the election. But I hope we'll have the opportunity at some point to share a good news story in terms of how much grant funding we are receiving. Does anybody have questions about the Q2 infrastructure report? Wow. I'm not seeing many questions at the moment. I had a question about the, on page 39, the bylaw 422 review that I just want a little more reminder of what is bylaw 422? Why are we revising it, and where are we going to be with that?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Bylaw 422 is our water rates and regulation bylaw. So it's a bylaw that is not only setting out a framework for setting rates, but also for the water use itself. For example, one of the appendixes to this bylaw is what is allowed use under stage 1, 2, 3, 4. one of the appendixes is the actual rates, and the bylaw itself, for example, currently contains a provision on shutting off water in certain circumstances. So this bylaw reviewed was, we're reviewing the bylaw, the appendixes related to the drought response plan on an annual basis, but this wholesome, more comprehensive review was triggered by a discussion we had with the board over the last several years with respect to how to encourage water conservation in our development processes. And as part of that, several bylaws were identified on that for updating to increase the water conservation provisions of those bylaws. This is the first one on the list. So we're doing a full review of this bylaw to confirm where there are options to increase or improve our water conservation approach and bring it forward. At the same time, this bylaw needs to be really modernized. It's pretty outdated. So that's a component of this bylaw review as well. And other reviews like the servicing bylaw are scheduled for the years to come as well.
Great. Thank you very much. We love water conservation. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. It's the significance of COVID still lingers. And if you could say something about kind of how you're managing to get anything done. It's just complicated times. So there's balancing. There seems to be some triaging going. So it was the essential services kind of and the focus of the staff. It's just been such a trying year and a half. If you could say something about not everything can get done, right? So you're having to make decisions. So if you could just kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Yeah, and I think there are several factors at play here which are driving our prioritization is the amount of work. And as discussed earlier on in earlier meetings, the work plan for the water and solid waste department is the infrastructure department is significant. And the amount of projects currently on the book earlier this year, we already knew that we would have enough work for way more than 1 year. So it's not surprisingly that some projects are not started yet because it wasn't anticipated that it would be started right away when budgets were approved. At the same time, of course, COVID is resulted in some delays, which caused projects that were planned to start in last year were delayed until this year. So other projects are moving forward as a result of that, as well as the emerging issues that continue to arise. Earlier this year, we had a landslide at the treatment plant that took away resources. Last year, issue started with ground settling at a landfill, not scheduled for, took a lot of time, took a lot of money as well, but also a significant amount of staff time. We now have an EOC deployment activation, which is, again, taking staff time away from working on projects. So it's a non-stop reprioritization based on urgency, importancy of the project. And as a result, some projects that are, although they are important and critical for long-term system maintenance and development, there are some of those projects that are they need to be continued to be delayed. And the fact that we still have, as indicated earlier this meeting, very significant challenges with finding people, staff with an engineering background, especially is not helping us in some of these projects as well. And as indicated earlier, some of the work we can, we're now hiring contractors to do that work that we're intended to do in-house. So I really hope that we can fill those positions, get these people trained. The good news is that within the utility services division, there was a vacancy for a utility technician vacant. to support our planning approval and service application processing. So to support development related applications. And we were successful there in hiring somebody that started 2 days ago with 30 years of experience in this kind of work. So 1 down, 2 to go. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. 2 water projects related questions. On the bottom of page 36, groundwater investigation phase 2 part 2, development of the RFP for Marianne West Park well development project is currently scheduled to be initiated in the fall of 2022. I just wanted to confirm that that date was right. And also, this is separate from any monitoring that we're going to be doing in the interim to see if and how it's affected and as part of the larger aquifer system.
Thank you for the question. It's actually the reason why it was delayed is because we first want to have the confirmation that we would receive a license for Church Road. There are some outstanding licenses for Town of Gibsons as well. We first want to have those discussions resolved, and because there might be some questions coming from those or conditions for monitoring as a result of those licenses, and we want to do a combined effort to determine the feasibility of this well in the broader context of what else is happening. And there is agreement in principle that this would be work that will be shared between the Town of Gibsons, SRD, Flynn Road, and Flynn Road is actually currently seeking capacity funding for the Squamish Nation to be engaged in that monitoring of the entire aquifer. And so that's the reason why we delayed this RFP, because we needed to draft the scope of work in a broader context. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm on page 46. Well, I'm sure all of the directors are hearing a lot about garbage lately. So there's a good news story and a less good news story. The good news story, the graph at the bottom of page 46 shows the reduction in residential curbside garbage, largely, I assume, due to the green waste or food waste pickup that was implemented. And so my question was, are we on target for that program, or we must have had an estimate of how much diversion that would accomplish, and how are we doing there?
Thank you for the question. Yes, the drop in curbside garbage compared to last year is about 230 ton, which is a very significant amount. It's a little bit less compared to the year prior, because last year Q2 was the first quarter that the COVID pandemic was with us, and that resulted in a significant amount of garbage to be disposed of because everybody was cleaning their houses and yards. So Q2 of 2020 is not really a representative of an average year. However, I confess that there is a significant uptake. If it's in line with expectations, so far it is, but I think it's good to see a full year, so to see the Q3 report as well to make a further remark about that. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Okay. And we did issue a recent press release about the garbage pickup challenges that we're having, which was much appreciated.
Maybe I can elaborate on the entire garbage situation a little bit more. We fully recognize that as an organization, we fully recognize that these are difficult times for residents because there's no routine there was no routine in when their garbage was picked up, and it's resulting in uncertainty, and uncertainty sometimes can flow over in frustration, and that's recognized. We have good news. Yesterday, I met with Waste Management, senior staff there, and by the end of this month, they are back up fully staffed again in terms of the drivers. So as of October 1st, they should be able to deliver full service without any interruptions. I have to say, this week, there are no due date, there are no missed pickups at the scale we used to have. There's no planned schedule changes. So this week is going fine, and we hope to maintain that for the upcoming 2 weeks. But there is a certainty that provided to us that as of October 1st, we should be over the big hurdles. And at the same time, it's included in the press release, but there are discussions happening with BC Transit, with Waste Management, sorry, I'm missing everything up, with Waste Management on the financial compensation that's, of course, associated with these significant service disruptions. So more to come there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, and that's really good news. Director Toth, your hand is still up.
Yes, it is, Chair. Coming back to water on page 37, up near the top, the raw water reservoir. Now, I know that directors have a variety of feelings about the reservoir project, and I acknowledge that. I just wanted to identify here that discussions with the project with the Seashell Nation are delayed and are now expected to be concluded in Q4 2021 to allow for this project, the feasibility study, to be completed early 2022. Reading those dates, I assume that means there will be nothing being brought forward on this project for budget 2022 because we don't know what the outcome of that is going to be yet. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. That's indeed anticipated. This is one of the projects that, as both on our side as well as on the side of the Seashell Nation, has resulted in a lower priority due to everything else that was happening. Thank you.
Thank you. And then one last question with water. We're obviously, all of our eggs are in a basket around Church Road. I don't see anything identified here to look at, say, the next phase of wells or other possibilities. So I'd like to hear, if staff are considering a plan C or D or J or Z, in case the province does come back and say that we're not approved for Church Road, recognizing, it's their most complex file right now. The aquifer is continually being redefined. Yeah, what happens if the province comes back and says no?
Thank you for that question. I can answer that question right now. I also think there is, within a month from now, I think we have a better sense on where Church Road is actually at. So there are, Langdale is the next one up. Grey Creek is being worked on. But of course, I completely agree with you. If Church Road would not move ahead, which I wouldn't expect, but if that's the case, there will be, it will take time for us to get Langdale, even the engineering and all that work to get that completed. So there will be another delay. But staff are planning to provide updates to the community in the form of Let's Talk Water events this fall. Once we have a final decision on Church Road, to provide an update to the community through Let's Talk Water events about what's the current status, what is the plan, short-term, long-term, and that's also related to the work that's being started at the moment to develop the water supply plans to really do the long-term planning for the water supply from 2025 forwards.
Thank you. Director Hiltz.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to keep on the water theme. It's on page 40. It's about the water distribution system and the presentation of the statistics. We had a brief chat and review. The public and board are becoming more and more interested in numbers like rainfall, flow, cubic meters, liters, all this kind of stuff. And the flow out of the treatment plant, as I've been looking at this, I'm trying to understand the significance of it to me as an individual. And I don't see myself reflected in the treatment plant, because right now we get water from Grey Creek, Town of Gibson's, Chasterwell, various sources. So whether there's another way to kind of present the water system at an individual level, and the annual report mentions liters per capita, and we always have a problems with how many capitas do we got, right? Tourist capitas, so what we do have connections though. So I'm starting to think, is liters per connection kind of a term, a phrase that we could use to going, are we doing better, or are we doing worse? Because during the summer, I don't think people really understand how much water is used. So I've been looking at this. I don't have a solution, and I don't want to dump a whole bunch of new reporting on staff. But what I'm wondering about is this a place for WASAC to kind of weigh in on kind of, looking at statistics and what makes sense to the individual, to take our system and make it presentable to an individual. So that's kind of where these charts have been in here at least for 6 years. They haven't changed in over 6 years. And back in the day, 6 years ago, we were more concerned about treatment plant capacity than we were supply capacity. So it's a comment and it's a question, and whether this is something of WASAC, it's a water supply issue in public participation. Whether staff has some comments about this, and whether, particularly with bringing in WASAC on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Staff definitely agree that there is a benefit of upgrading these slides from treatment capacity to actual water supply capacity, maybe even delineate in terms of the sources being active or not. So we'll take that with us and see what we can do for the next Q3 report. But that's going to be provided in November, as it looks like. So if we can do it within the upcoming 2 months, we'll do it. Otherwise, it will be Q1 2022. And that would also allow us to do a full year with new set of parameters. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that is a good idea. I have a final one. It came to my attention recently, and I know that I had been told this once upon a time, but that our water treatment plant not only has a maximum capacity, it has a minimum capacity. If enough water is not running through that plant, it can't operate. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. Our plant has a maximum capacity, as you indicated, and a minimum. And the minimum is primarily, we have a minimum design capacity. What we can so that's minimum capacity that, for example, our primary pumps to get the water into the treatment plant are designed to run at. Of last several weeks, because we were using a lot of water from Grey Creek, from Chester Road, and we have now the additional supply from Town of Gibson's. We actually are shutting the plant down for several hours every couple of days we have our water reservoir full, that's draining over, let's say, a period of 12 hours, and then we start the plant back up again, and there we go again. Last week, we actually were able to confirm that our pumps can do better than they were designed to do, because we can actually run them at a lower capacity than they were designed to do for short periods of time. So that actually allows us to keep the plant operating instead of that we have to shut it down, which is very beneficial from a staffing perspective, because shutting down a plant and starting it up again is always tricky and is always resulting in unforeseen circumstances. So the fact that we can throttle the operations of the plant even more is actually a benefit. So from an operation perspective, this period, any challenges also allows for learnings and new discoveries, and this is one of them, which is good.
Thank you very much. It has really been a year and a half of new discoveries, has it not? So let us move on. The next thing on our agenda, I believe, is the WASAC minutes. Is there any follow-up that anybody has from WASAC minutes? Transportation minutes, PMAC minutes, and then we have two letters. One of which, we've already dealt with the stage 4 exemption for farmers, which seems to have gotten people over the worst of the hurdles, thank heavens. And we've had a little rain since then, which is really good news for farmers. So if I don't see anything further, we do have an in-camera portion of our agenda. So I would look for a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with section 91A of the Community Charter. Personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employee, or agent of the municipality or another position appointed by the municipality. Moved, seconded. Thank you. All in favor? All right, we are going to go in camera at this point. Do we have any public questions? IT, have we received any public questions by email or chat?
No questions.
Thank you very much. All right, in that case, we are going to move in camera. Wondering if directors Beamish and Pratt may be available shortly to join us in camera.
Director Pratt has just turned off her video, so she will be able to come back in once the meeting is locked. Director Beamish will not.
Well, I don't think there's a great deal I can do about that at this point. So I think we shall proceed in camera. We need to, IT, can you shut us down?
I will do that. One moment, please.
Thank you very much, and welcome back to the end of our Infrastructure Services Committee meeting of Thursday, September 9th, 2021. May I see a motion to adjourn? Moved, seconded, all in favor? Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you at board.
See you later. Dean?
Aye.
Dean?
Yes.